Hey everyone, we're at the Palazzo here with the Cyber Hub podcast. I've got my really good friend Maor Bin. He's the founder of Adaptive Shield, one of the companies I look forward to speaking with. And I don't know where Danny is. She's oh, Danny from if you guys aren't listening to Audience First or watching her and Chris Roberts take on some of the most egregious emails that come out of people in sales for some godforsaken reason, you should. and and this is the background here at the suite. This is no alcohol, folks. We haven't started drinking yet,
We're
right?
just talking about it,
We're
though.
just talking about it. We're getting drunk by thinking about alcohol. Mal, welcome to the show.
James, thanks for having me once again. It's a real pleasure to, you know, first of all, seeing you in person, right?
Right,
And
like we're not doing this like weirdly apart, right? It's amazing.
no, I love it. Thanks for the invite. As always, it's a real pleasure to seeing you. Uh, yeah,
So I'm glad you made it to Vegas safe, right? Air travel today keeps everyone delayed. I
I
got in delayed.
appreciate it.
I got in delayed, man. Like it's crazy. I feel like air travel has deteriorated in this country,
Yeah, for sure.
right? Like it's bad. Anyways, welcome to Vegas. What happens in Vegas ends up on the internet. Remember that. Don't let anyone tell you anything otherwise. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas was before Hacker Summer Camp in Las Vegas.
For sure. Staying at Blackhat, you should always, shut down the Wi-Fi kind of connection of any kind.
Yeah, don't go to Mandalay Bay with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you do it at your own risk. And when something bad happens to you, don't come asking for help.
precisely.
Just smash your phone and go out to the desert, bury it somewhere, get a new phone, call it a day.
Precisely. Don't even bring a phone with you.
Because your phone is your identity. And identity's the new perimeter. How about that?
Well, sounds about right.
I mean that's what Adaptive Shield does though. You guys are in the identity business.
Yeah, identity is a huge part of, our strategy when we talk about SaaS security in general, and we think about what we want to bring to the table as part of our SaaS security strategy and our SaaS security platform. Obviously, identity and access governance, is a huge part of what we do. And when we think about what companies and organizations today are trying to think of, or setting up their SaaS security program, obviously identity is a huge part of it, because most of your IT stack moved from your premises to cloud and to SaaS. And what left out of it is actually your identity, which is obviously related to your users and your devices and everything
Your
that.
human and non-human identity. And I think there's a really healthy debate today on that, right? Because to me, I've said identity is the new endpoint. I said identity has replaced the traditional endpoint type of discussion, right? Like I'm gonna hack your phone. No, I'm gonna steal your identity, right? Like I'm gonna pretend to be you. I'm gonna, you know, and we saw that, and I'm forgetting the story off the top of my head because it's been a really long day. But there was a story where I think the criminals hacked a company using the identity token,
Yeah,
right, of the user, and these identity tokens are the new password,
right.
right? They're the new password, and so you kind of look at what identities what identity has kind of turned into. Let's turn identity from a password to a token. Okay, but then let's not rotate these tokens sometimes. And I think that creates a challenge, right? How do you address identity as a whole? Like, what's your view as a founder, as someone who started a company with the emphasis of identity? What's your philosophy around identity? Your personal philosophy, Mar?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, when we're thinking about the modern enterprise these days, I mean, what we'll look about or what we'll look at is, users and different entities. So entity could be, a user, as we said, but could be also an application, right? So, for example, these tokens that you're talking about are actually applications that are connecting to other applications, consuming data and collecting data out of it, processing it in some sort of a fashion. And, you know, it's dangerous.
Right.
And when we talk about, the different identities, so you have on one hand the people, and on the second hand, the devices that these people are using, and on the, kind of the third party or third hand, the applications these users are consuming, and a user or a person, using their devices in order to connect to an application. This is the relationship that you have, amongst identities these days in any organization, for that sake.
You brought up kind of the interconnectivity of identity within all these different places and
Right.
spots, right? To me, when you look at identity today, there's not a real clear cut kind of, I don't want to say solution, but there's not really a clear cut way to identify um, identity behavior,
Right.
right? You see a lot of people do user behavior analytics, and a lot of it is what I like to call basic policies with a little bit of machine learning, right? That's really what it is,
That's fair enough. Yeah.
right? What's the next stage of that?
I think today, when you think about user behavior or entity behavior, or as many people like to call it, UEBA, user and entity behavior analytics. I think the main idea behind it, or the main challenge, to be more precise, is to find the balance between false positives and false negatives, right? And there is always, it needs to be kind of, needs to be a balance between them, because if you do one thing, the other, I mean, this is obvious, right? And I think kind of the approach today is to focus on, or trying to reduce, false negative as much as possible, and with the idea behind it that we'll have to deal with some false negatives, right? So, for example, don't tell me stuff that are incorrect, because I don't want to deal with alert fatigue. I don't want to deal with alerts. I have plenty of work. I have plenty of things to do as part of my day to day. So I don't want to deal with false alerts, but I'm okay with missing some of the alerts because I have other compensating controls or other controls in place that I can find, these missing kind of alerts, or false negative, as we just said. So this is kind of the main balance and the focus, in my opinion, that we should look as part of a solution. We're trying to look for behavior
Right.
analytics, or talking about machine learning or statistical learning.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up something very interesting, right? Which is the idea that we can somehow study a human specific activity and trigger red flags, which you and I both know humans interact with technology very differently throughout their lifetime of using, said technology, right? And I'm not talking about how someone browses an iPhone or what thumb or finger they use or what hand they hold it in. I'm talking about the more introspective idea of browsing history, browsing style, purchases. There's no real pattern to it, right?
Right.
There's not. I mean, Amazon has spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to analyze shopping patterns to only say we're going to do Prime Day in July, right? Like that was their big thing of analyzing shopper behavior, right?
Right.
And they typically do that in July because really after 4th of July, people don't spend money. People don't buy big things until Christmas at that point, right? Because you've got back to school and the fall and all of that stuff, right? So they did Prime Day in July. It's actually very interesting to me because I think the same applies to me as a practitioner's view of how my humans interact with technology. In the distributed workforce that we have today, with people being all over the world and all different time zones at different times, and people work differently, right? One of the smartest people that ever worked for me, a security architect, was a guy who would log in at 4 in the morning and work from 4 to 6. At 6, he would stop working.
Sounds
AM,
legit. Yeah.
say 6 a.m. Stop working, and he wouldn't log back on until anywhere between 10 a.m. to noonish.
Right.
And then he would do 3-4 more hours, log off, disappear, and then at 9 p.m. come back on.
Right.
And work for a few more hours, 2-3 hours, whatever the case may be. This pattern wasn't the same every day. This pattern was very different, and he did different things at different times. Meaning, it wasn't like he was checking email from 4 to 6 a.m. and then he was going away and coming back, and then he was, logging in to something and doing, his writing code or building out plans. He wasn't doing any of that, right? His workload was very different. He processed things differently. There was no way of studying this person. But if I had an alert for every time he did something out of the ordinary, and if my standard alert was if someone logs in after 5, or if someone logs in, before 8, then give me all these notices. I just think that we've lost kind of the right approach towards people. How do we fix it?
I think that
that long rant was that question. Sorry.
No, so the answer is pretty simple, to be honest. So I'll give you an example. I mean, you obviously, I mean, and the audience can't see it because this is a podcast, right? Maybe Danny here will post some of the photos she was
taking, yeah.
But I can see you, for example, using Mac, right?
Right.
So it's not only about, and we call it UEBA, right? User behavior analytics or user entity behavior analytics, but it's not only about the behavior, right? It's also about the pattern and the usage and stuff that related, as we said earlier, to your identity. So, for example, I see that you use Mac. So if, for example, I'm having hard time in predicting your activity and your behavior, I might add into that, equation some other parameters that will help me, determine, if this was a legit kind of usage or is it an anomaly in your behavior. So, for example, you're now in Vegas and you're connecting to your, I don't know, Zoom account or Slack or wherever, but you're using it from your own Mac, which a device that we're familiar with. That's fine, right? But if you, for example, somehow pop with another device that,
let's say I show up with a Windows device. Now I've been hacked. Someone stole my identity.
Right.
I don't use Windows. I don't.
You shouldn't.
I refuse to. I mean, literally, our IT department in my company issued me an HP laptop.
Yeah.
You know how much dust is on that laptop?
I can.
6 months worth. 6 months worth.
So, that's exactly my point, right? And it sounds simple, but it's actually, more complex than that. There are obviously, many features to consider, as part of such model. But, a device or that is related directly to your identity is one of them.
So Maor, let me ask you this. You guys are at Blackhat.
Right.
One of your marketing guys here, Hananel, was telling me a secret before you came on here. That you guys are launching something new at Blackhat.
Yeah.
What are you launching? Because Hananel was like trying to be all secretive about it. He's like, we're launching something new, but don't tell anyone. Right. And Yara and Shiri were teasing. They're like, we're launching something, but we're not going to tell you. I was like, I'll figure it out from Maor.
Yeah, no.
They're like, we want your face to be surprised.
No, absolutely. And this is a good thing that, we're now talking with the whole world, to reveal it, but, it's going to be, public soon. So, we're launching soon enough, and by the time that, this will be published, I guess it will already be out.
Yeah, it'll already be out.
So we're launching, our ITDR capabilities, which stands for Identity Threat Detection and Response. And this is kind of, pretty outstanding solution because, combining it with our SaaS security capabilities and, identities kind of our main focus, and being really the only SaaS security solution that today, connects to more than 130 applications out of the box, and it, right?
Yeah, we've done plenty of webinars with some demos on this stuff. It's been and by the way, for the reference for the webinars is Maor and I did a bunch of webinars with my friends over at the Hacker News, our friends over at the Hacker News, right?
Absolutely.
Great group of friends. And all of those webinars are available for all of you to go watch on thehackernews.com. You can go check them out. I think they might also be on the Adaptive Shield website. I'll put the link in the show notes so you guys can go check those out.
For sure. So this relates directly to that. When we speak about identity, when we speak about SaaS security, when we speak about identity being the new perimeter, this is exactly where it all like comes together, right? So we're launching the new capability of identity threat detection and response. And when we think about it with combining all these activities from more than 130 applications that are supported out of the box in our platform, it's really, if you think about it, pretty outstanding, right? Because it's no longer, being, focused on one application or a handful of applications for that sake, right? You can get a full visibility on your entire stack, finally, right?
Well, and you can get visibility. You can also detect anomalies in your stack now,
Right.
which is significant,
Right.
right? I mean, what's the main benefit of the ITDR?
I think what's really outstanding here is, besides this feature, we treat kind of SaaS security or SaaS security solution as they should be, platforms, because they protecting platforms eventually. So we keep adding more and more use cases to the platform, and ITDR is the recent one, obviously, but we cover lots of other capabilities as well. And we appreciate the fact that there are solutions that cover a specific section or a specific feature that they focus only on that. But our long-term vision and our mission is to protect SaaS applications, and as part of that, we deliver a comprehensive SaaS security platform that includes many use cases, which include security misconfiguration, identity and access governance, analytics, uh, SaaS to SaaS connection. We talked about the
Right.
interconnectivity and the OAuth applications. We talked about devices and user identities that are related to these devices. And the recent capability is identity threat detection and response.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these capabilities start to give you a lot more insight into your SaaS stack,
Correct.
right? Now, you've been living this world now. Adaptive Shield is how old now?
More than 4 years. Yeah.
So a little over 4 years.
Yeah.
Looking at SaaS stacks pre-COVID, right? And I'm bringing up COVID in 2023, and I apologize. But bringing up the SaaS stack, because I feel like the SaaS stack has tripled since COVID, right? Have you seen the same? Do you think like SaaS stacks got
Yeah.
larger
Oh,
as we kind of moved more into the cloud, more into a distributed workforce?
listen, Jay, I think, this is stating the obvious. I mean, you obviously, you know me. I mean, I'm always talking about the fact that SaaS and adoption of SaaS application is growing, super fast. And I always like to say that, today adapting a SaaS application is really easy. I mean, you need only two things, right? 10 minutes of your time and a credit card.
And an
Right?
API key.
Yeah.
An API key
Yeah.
most of the time.
Well, that's the one of the
That's one of the integrations, right? Get your API key. I mean, I've seen it. They make it almost too easy, right? It's like a drive-through at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Right. It's literally like, if you ever notice these fast food places, they're always at the edge of the highway with a big sign, and you're tired and you're driving and you're like, oh, all right, let me stop and get the most unhealthy food I can possibly put in my body.
Yeah, but I think one of the reasons, organization adapting, and I was discussing it really earlier with one of the security professionals here at Blackhat, and he was telling me, with all the young people that, an organization brings in, everybody thinks they're an IT admin, right? And they bring over, new SaaS applications. They think they can manage them.
Yep.
But in fact, what they're creating is a huge, hole in your security architecture and your security methodologies. So, yeah.
Oh, there goes my mic. There we go. We saved it. That was a good one. That was a good one. All right. So let me tell you this. I'm a big proponent of identity. You and I've kind of had this conversation offline as well. When in my last role, not the one I'm in at the moment, when I was the CISO at Glorify, we launched a mobile banking app that was passwordless for our users from day one.
Yep.
Right. And before we went bankrupt, we were in the process of moving our entire company internally to passwordless. And one of the challenges I ran into is not everyone supports a non-password type of SSO. Do you see that changing in the identity world? Do you see more SaaS applications kind of go to the passwordless type of model, maybe over the traditional kind of?
I think most of the SaaS apps eventually will support SSO or kind of, offering SSO integration of some sort. Uh, if you call it password, I wouldn't call it passwordless because eventually you need, some sort of a password. But many SaaS applications today they block the usage of local credentials and offer connections only to SSO. Now, if you implement this kind of architecture as part of your SaaS architecture, that's actually a good practice. The problem start when you start doing a mix of things and this is a must have in any organization because some of the users they need to bypass sso for legitimate reasons, right? For robustness or redundancy or being able to connect and not staying locked out if the sso just fallen, right? So all legit, right? But you need to somehow maintain it. And when the organization is a big organization, right? You need to invest in what I like to call security hygiene, being able to, clean up these, SaaS applications from time to time and being able to get this kind of visibility in order to stay and work in a secure fashion, but also invest in your identity governance because, if you have local credentials as a separate part of your SSO methodology, right, you need to make sure you also maintain the native security controls within each SaaS application, meaning you need to invest in password complexity and make sure it aligns with your policy. You need to invest in multi-factor.
You're talking about a lot of work, though, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you think of an average organization has 80 SaaS applications, depending on the size, and I'm underestimating here, right?
Right.
The look you just gave me was like, shut the F up, James. 80? I haven't
we're
seen
literally talking about hundreds of apps,
hundreds and in some cases thousands, right? Managing every single one of those is a tall order, right? Because that's literally multiple hours a week, multiple maybe hours a month of having to go into every single SaaS application your org has and ensuring that the policies that you've set forth are met in that specific SaaS application. That's that's a lot of work.
That very thing you're describing right now is actually what
of
was a strong indicator for us
right
back in the day that an automated process is required, right? The idea of managing, continuous security hygiene across your SaaS estate
is a lot of work. It's insane. It's not manageable, right? If you don't automate it, then what are you doing with it?
Yeah, no, it's really. I mean, I don't like to use the word impossible because I like to think that,
well, no, it's possible. It's just how much resources are going to have to dedicate to do it.
Precisely.
Right. The idea is, what's the cost of the risk? Right.
Yeah.
What's the cost to solve that risk. And that's kind of how you weigh it. So
Yeah. If you want to do it for one app, it's probably manageable. You can have several people investing and researching and maintaining this application, because what happens in most of the time when a security person will come to the application owner and will ask him, if the application is secure, right? What they're gonna say?
sure.
Of
Yeah,
course
of
it's
course.
secure, right?
Yeah.
But in fact, the security team, they don't know how to challenge, these kind of statements.
Well,
Um,
so let me push back on that. Do you mind?
yeah,
I don't think they don't know how to challenge it. And I was telling Yod earlier, right? The same thing. There's a hill you go to die on as a security practitioner, and then there are battles where you just send an email and you say you're confirming to me that this SaaS application has A, B, and C done. Correct? Answer me. Yes. And that's that, because you've got limited. Most security teams are understaffed by 20 to 30%
right.
on average. Most security teams are overworked, overstressed. I mean, the amount of people in our industry that have diabetes, cholesterol, a drinking problem, a pill habit is one of the largest of any other industry on the planet, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on security people. There's a lot of pressure because we have to be right 100% of the time. No one else in the company has to be right 100% of the time. No one, but security people, they have to be right 100% of the time, because the moment you're not right, everything goes to shit.
Yeah.
And when everything goes to shit, you're even under more stress than where you were trying to prevent everything from getting to shit.
So you know what? Allow me to correct myself. It's not that they don't know how to challenge these kind of.
They just don't pick those battles. They don't pick those battles, not
I,
because
I
they're lazy.
I think it depends on the app. So, for example, if it's a common app like Office 365, so everybody likes to be on top of it. But if it's a less common app like Salesforce, or even less common like Miro, for example,
Right.
right?
Like Mira is a great example. That's typically, app designers, right?
Yeah.
That's the flow. Yeah, I get that. That's probably a handful of people.
So, I mean, it's obviously not their focus. So it's really, so again, allow me to correct myself. It depends on the app. But when, security folks comes to the application owner on some apps and they tell them, whether it's secure, or try to figure out whether it's secure or not, and they tell them, one thing, but they don't know, what exactly to ask. So they obviously, the kind of what comes to mind is, for all your SaaS estate, it would be very good for an organization to have kind of an advisor or SaaS expertise in place that they can go ahead and consume. And again, this is obviously, my personal opinion, but
No, no,
I,
I mean,
yeah,
your personal opinion counts.
yeah,
I think your people's opinions and how they see things, and our ability to be able to take that knowledge and apply it to our point of view in order to form a more informed decision over these things is critical. Because at the end of the day, I say I practice cybersecurity. I don't work in cyber. I don't operate. I practice it. I practice it because every single day it changes and every single day is different.
right.
Every single thing I do is different every single time. Nothing's ever the same. Nothing's ever the same. Microsoft just changed Azure AD's new name to what? Entra ID, right? Like, who came up with that and why? Like, I'm going to go on another naming rant here, but why? Stop rebranding your products, people. Azure Active Directory is as old as the internet.
Right.
It's synonymous with identity.
Absolutely.
It's synonymous with everyone in the industry. We all know when I say Active Directory what I mean. Go
Identity.
tell someone enter ID now. Watch they're gonna look at you like, what the hell did you just say? You just cuss at my mom in a language I don't understand. What is that?
I think the main idea probably behind it is that Active Directory kind of, considered an on-prem. solution. And I think,
I'm
yeah.
going to push back on that, Maor. I'm going to push back. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. This is a problem we as an industry have, and I'm telling you this as a practitioner.
Yeah.
I come to know a product, and I communicate that product to everyone in my organization: IT, technology, engineering, marketing, HR. They all know what Active Directory is. Now they're going to log into Microsoft one day, and it's not going to say Active Directory anymore. It's going to say Enter ID. And you know what's going to happen to my help desk? It's going to crash like Walt's call center in Israel, right? It's just going to crash. It's going to crash because everyone's going to be like, I'm looking for Active Directory and I can't find it.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah.
Right. And so and the same goes to naming APTs multiple name, and the same goes to rebranding products, and the same goes if you've got something where people are synonymous. You're launching ITTR, right? Synonymous. Don't ever rebrand it, please. For fuck's sake, don't rebrand it, right?
We don't
Like,
plan to. Yeah.
give it the name, stick to the name, right? It's a good name. You hear it, you know exactly what it does. I don't know what Enter ID does. Someone's gonna have to explain it to me at Microsoft.
Yeah.
You're just gonna have to, right? Because I don't know. I know what Active Directory does.
Yeah.
Now, if this does the same thing, then my question is, why change it? That's like all of a sudden changing a hamburger and calling it a burrito. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not.
Even though I like to eat both.
I enjoy both very much, right? I haven't had a burrito in years because of the calorie amount in a burrito, right? Like, I just, I think, burritos like 1,800 calories. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's, that's insane when you think of like what our body should be consuming a day, which is 1,500.
This is the number you checked.
An average
I'm gonna quote
Chipotle
you on that,
burrito, the average Chipotle burrito is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,300 calories, depending on what you put inside.
I'm gonna write it down right now.
Write it down, check me, call me out on it. Right when we publish this pod, someone's gonna probably write in the comments, James, you're absolutely wrong. If you take a low carb tortilla or a spinach tortilla, you can reduce calories by about 600%, or some other stuff. But Maor, so tell us what's on the what how do you see identity developing till the end of this year?
Well, as I said, when it comes to identity, it's really not, how we used to think about it in the past. It's a combination of things, which, you need to take kind of or get in a new place in your kind of security architecture, right? Because until today, you had, users and some items, protecting these users. You had devices and some capabilities or some products, protecting these devices. You had the application with some products and solutions protecting these applications, and you had the firewall. All this was under, what we call the on-prem, the good old on-prem, right? And the firewall protecting all of it. So, none of the outside threats or threat actors can, allegedly breach the firewall, right?
We know that to be false.
But
Mythbusters.
but when things, on your entire, architecture kind of went outside to, to SaaS or to the cloud, you need kind of a new approach in place. And this shifting from, the thinking of securing your premises into securing your identity. And this is where I think, we're going with identity, because identity, never changed throughout the years, right? It's always the same thing. We're talking about people, we're talking about users, we're talking about devices, and we're talking about applications, right? The combination of things.
The human and non-human elements.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Also entities, of course, a part of it, and applications are a huge part of your identity and should be part of your identity architecture. Um, but when we think about the new world and the modern enterprise, kind of shifting from securing the premises, from securing the identity, this is exactly the kind of thinking we should go ahead and develop.
I like that thinking. How do we make it practical for people?
So in order to make it practical, you really need, you know, uh, I always like to think of security on focusing on two things. First one is visibility. The second one is control. And you need visibility across your entire users and all the devices and all the applications, right? Doesn't matter if it's a managed application that the organization adopted or whether it's a shadow IT app that someone, just used a credit card and suddenly, 10,000 people, in the organization are using it, right? Um, you need this visibility, right? The second thing after you got this visibility is to understand how to control it and how to set the security controls as part of it. As soon as you have those two items in place, I think this is kind of a good start of starting implementing the right methodology uh, 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 that you need in order to work in a secure fashion.
Yeah, I like that approach. I like the methodology behind kind of going through the different steps. When if you have a listener who's listening to this now who's going, we've got more SaaS applications than we can handle. I don't even know how to pitch this to my CISO, right? Because could be they could be the IAM, identity access
Right.
management responsibility. What would you tell them to pitch their CISO? How would you wrap this problem to them in a way that could get them to get buy-in from leadership to go about getting a product like Adaptive Shield or a solution to help them automate everything?
First of all, I don't think that a problem starts or ends with the product, right? I mean, you need to decide you want to build in your organization a SaaS security program,
Right.
right? And as soon as you decided that, now you need to make sure you're doing the right steps in order to uh, uh, secure your organization. It doesn't mean you have to bring over a tool, right? You have to start with the things you think are part of your methodology, right? So you can, by all means, start with one application, understand, how you want to build it, set up the right visibility, right? And it doesn't need to be with a tool that you buy necessarily, but you need to do some, or at least I would advise to have some automation in place. Now, in most organizations, bringing security professionals to develop, in-house tools could be very problematic because as soon as the you know several people will leave the organization, the organization will be out of there won't be
Right, right.
people
There'd be
to.
no one there to
Yeah,
take responsibility for the tools.
exactly. So you can always start small and start building your controls in place, but at the end of the day you will be or at least I will encourage every security professional to start having an automated process in place.
Yeah, you got to start building it from somewhere. The one thing I would add to that, Amar, if it's okay with you, is
Yeah.
um, understand what are your critical SaaS applications and start with that. Start with your most critical, your Salesforce, your HubSpot, your Office 365 potentially, um, and even your AWS and Azure environments, or even GCP, right? I mean, those are critical kind of applications within your pipeline.
Right.
Focus on those, and then start to kind of spread out into the less problematic ones like Zoom or Teams. Once you manage Office 365, you manage Teams. So let me say just Zoom or WebEx or whatever else is out there nowadays.
So, by the way, I wouldn't call it less problematic because sometimes in some of the application you mentioned could be very critical, data of the organization. But it's really, when building every program, when starting to build every program, you need focus, and you need to implement the same steps in a kind of repeatable way in order for it to be effective. So I would start with the focus the organization have, and kind of looking after the crown jewels, and then expand into more. And again, I won't call it non-problematic apps, but to more apps that you think should be kind of the next focus for you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, maybe non-problematic is not the right word, but I would think, kind of, I rank apps based on business criticality.
Right.
The most critical apps are the ones I spend the most time on. The high ones we spend the second most time on.
I can
Right.
relate to that. Yeah.
Right. The medium ones we spend obviously some time on, and then low and not don't really matter, right? Like a
Right.
like a potential app for, I don't know,
Yeah, if an app, like
that's used by two people and they use it for
precisely, yeah, exactly.
creating memes for
Yeah.
the marketing team, I don't
Right.
really care, right? Like, that's not on my agenda to address.
Right.
But other apps are. Salesforce, I absolutely care. HubSpot, I absolutely care.
Right.
AWS, I absolutely care.
Right.
Right. Like I mean, I would rank that. That'd be important for me.
Yeah. And I think that's a good start. And this is where, when we talk about visibility, this is exactly it. Understand, your SaaS assets, know what apps, organization is using, what's more important, what's more critical for the organization. And obviously, if, it's an app that, two people, are using in the organization, it has no critical data in it. So, probably no one cares, right?
Well, you're right. It's not that no one cares. It's not, the risk isn't worth the effort.
Yeah.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, as practitioners, right, what we're trying to do is create a higher cost to hit our valuable critical assets. Right. So that's why I'm going to defend my critical assets, and I'm going to spend a lot of my money there
Right.
than I am potentially on an app with memes on it, as an example. And I'm saying that strictly as an example, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the approach I look at it, or or something along those lines, because I'm more concerned with that. I'm more concerned with what's critical for my org, what's going to keep our business running, and what's going to keep our data secure and away from regulatory oversight, investor scrutiny, board scrutiny, all of these different things that are really critical for an organization, right? And a practitioner per se, like really important for a practitioner.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly right.
Because there's an aspect to this that I'm not very fond of when it comes to SaaS, and you talked about it, which is the ease by which someone can connect an application.
Right.
But then the second part, which I think is even more dangerous, is the ease of which data, real live data, could end up in some of these SaaS applications. Is what do you see when it comes to data ending up in SaaS? Like, are you seeing a lot of your customers essentially going like, wow, we connected it and all of a sudden we discovered we had data sitting in applications we didn't even know about?
Yeah, for sure. So we're seeing lots of, when it comes to SaaS applications, again, you need to put the right controls in place. And some of the SaaS applications, they have really good features, but you have to know how to use them. And sometimes, these, kind of small errors that people are doing as part of the day to day, not in purpose or anything like that, but these small errors can lead to a very serious problems in the organizations. So a very common problem that we're seeing is public links that are accessible anonymously, and we're seeing our customers seeing lots of really sensitive data as part of these publicly accessible links, right? Including SSN, of their customers, including sensitive information that people can potentially access because these are publicly accessible links.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to learn more about Adaptive Shield? Or
I think, just type Adaptive Shield on Google and you get into our website, and we have plenty of materials. And we talk within our website on the entire capabilities of the platform and the way we'll look at SaaS security and the use cases you should care as part of your SaaS security program.
well, and you guys have a booth at Blackhat, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. I'm going to be stopping by your booth. I know this is going to be published after the fact, but y'all will see a reel on Thursday with me at the Adaptive Shield booth, letting y'all know about this episode. And when you do that, comment below that you've seen the reel, and I'll put you in for a drawing to get a bunch of really cool Cyber Help podcast swag. Fair? Pretty cool. Yeah.
Sounds excellent. Yeah.
Doesn't it? Yeah, I want to do something really cool at the booth with Adaptive Shield, because Maor and I, like, we have a thing, and we'll be stopping by the booth on Thursday to do a really cool reel and post it out there for everyone to come. Make sure to listen to this podcast, and at the very end, at this very moment, comment with what I'm going to ask on the reel. And if you do that on the podcast, this very moment, 44 minutes in, then you'll enter a drawing, and I'll send you some really cool Cyber Help podcast swag. People love that. People love swag. Who doesn't love swag?
Yeah.
I got a really cool swag from you right here.
Yeah.
Check it out, y'all. An Adaptive Shield coat pin, which is
Adaptive Shield.
It's an Adaptive Shield, and it's got a guy with like really cool hair. I want that hair. I don't have that hair anymore.
Everybody does, James.
Like I mean, Danny's got the hair. Danny's got like luxurious hair. It's almost slaps you in the face. Maor, thank you for coming on the podcast, man.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to do another webinar together. And I'll see you Thursday at the booth. It's going to be a blast. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Jam Session here at the Cyber Help Podcast. We're in Blackhat. We're at Plaza with my good friend Danny Wolf of Audience First. We're hanging out here. It's end of day one. I think tomorrow we kick off pretty darn early, right? What time is the show floor open? 10 a.m.? 10 a.m. Hananel, 10 a.m. Do they not know this is Vegas? Like, why can't they do it from like 12 to 4? Like, who's going to be there at 10 other than the salespeople? Anyone? Are you going to be there at 10?
I'm in several meetings, so no. But yeah.
So your answer is equivocally no. I'm not going to be there at 10. We need to talk to Blackhat, Danny. We got to change this to like Tel Aviv hours, right? Like 12 to 4. Like, that's what it's got to be, 12 to 4. Yeah, I heard that. Chris Roberts was telling me you're bringing in people at 8 a.m. Who brings people in at 8 a.m.? Why would anyone do that? I don't know. I you're brave, and you've got CISOs actually coming. I mean, I got to do a live show at 6 a.m. Take that. All right, Maor. Toda rabba. Thank you very much. Toda rabba means thank you very much in Hebrew, y'all. So, really appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate Hananel, Yara, Shiri, and the team at Adaptive Shield. You guys are always fun to work with, man.
Oh, thanks for having us as always. And, it's a pleasure.
It's absolutely.